Clara Wilson hurried down the street, her worn leather bag bouncing against her hip as she dodged through the morning crowd. The autumn air carried a chill that turned her cheeks pink and made her pull her faded blue coat tighter around her shoulders. She was running late for her shift at Sunny Corner Cafe, and Mrs. Green, though kind-hearted, was strict about punctuality. Just as she rounded the corner, the familiar smell of fresh bread and coffee greeted her. Clara pushed through the door, the little bell above it announcing her arrival. 5 minutes late, Clara, Mrs. Green called from behind the counter, though her tone held no real anger. I'm sorry. The bus was delayed again, Clara said, quickly tucking her bag under the counter and grabbing her apron. I'll stay extra to make up for it. Mrs. Green waved away her offer with a flour-dusted hand. Just make sure you charm those morning grumps with your smile. We've got the usual crowd today. The usual crowd meant the business people who stopped in for coffee before heading to the tall glass buildings downtown. Clara knew most of them by name and order. Mr. Robinson with his black coffee and blueberry muffin, Ms. Taylor with her soy latte, extra hot, and then there was him. The man who never looked at her when he ordered, who spoke into his phone while pointing at whatever pastry caught his eye. Harrison Montgomery. Clara only knew his name because everyone knew his name. His family owned half the buildings in the city, and his face occasionally appeared in the local news. The morning rush kept Clara busy, moving between tables with practiced ease, refilling cups and clearing plates. She was wiping down a table near the window when the bell chimed again. Harrison Montgomery walked in, his tailored coat and polished shoes a stark contrast to the casual atmosphere of the cafe. As usual, he was on his phone, gesturing impatiently at the counter. Clara moved to take his order, notepad ready. Just a moment, he said to whoever was on the other end of the call, then looked at the display case. Double espresso and one of those. He pointed at a chocolate croissant without looking at Clara. Coming right up, Mr. Montgomery, she said, turning to prepare his order. For the first time ever, he looked directly at her. You know my name? Clara felt her cheeks warm. Everyone knows your name. The Montgomery building is right across the street. She nodded toward the window, where a gleaming skyscraper towered over the smaller businesses. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. And yours is? Clara, she said, pouring his espresso into a small cup. Clara Wilson. He studied her for a moment longer than necessary, making her suddenly aware of her messy ponytail and the small coffee stain on her apron. Then his phone buzzed, drawing his attention away. Clara placed his order on the counter. That'll be $750. He handed her a 20 without breaking his renewed phone conversation and walked away without waiting for change. Clara sighed, placing his change in the tip jar as she always did. The day continued as normal. A brief lull after the morning rush, then the lunch crowd, then another quiet period in the afternoon. Clara was restocking sugar packets when Mrs. Green approached with an envelope. This came for you, she said, curiosity evident in her voice. Hand-delivered by a man in a very nice suit. Clara took the envelope, turning it over in her hands. It was thick, cream-colored paper with her name written in elegant script on the front. No address, no stamp. Well, open it, Mrs. Green urged, not bothering to hide her interest. Clara carefully broke the seal and pulled out a card. It was an invitation. Heavy paper with gold lettering. You are cordially invited to attend the annual Montgomery Foundation Charity Gala, she read aloud, her voice growing softer with disbelief. This Saturday evening at 8 o'clock at the Montgomery estate. Mrs. Green's eyes widened. The Montgomery Gala? That's the social event of the year. Only the city's elite get invited. Clara turned the invitation over, looking for some explanation. A small note was handwritten on the back. Your presence is specifically requested. Transportation will be provided. Tim, Harrison Montgomery? Mrs. Green whispered, as if saying the name too loudly might make the invitation disappear. Clara, what did you do to get his attention? Nothing, Clara said, genuinely confused. I served him coffee like I do every day. He barely even looks at me. Mrs. Green's expression turned suspicious. Well, he certainly noticed you today. The question is why. Clara slipped the invitation back into the envelope. It doesn't matter. I can't go. Can't go? Are you crazy? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Clara gestured at herself, her simple clothes, her practical shoes. Look at me. I don't belong at fancy parties with rich people. I wouldn't know how to act, what to say. I don't even have anything to wear." Mrs. Green crossed her arms. "Nonsense. My daughter Lisa is about your size and she left a few dresses when she moved. As for how to act, just be yourself." "You're a lovely girl, Clara." Clara bit her lip, considering. It had been so long since she'd gone anywhere special. After her mother got sick 3 years ago, Clara's life had narrowed to work, home, hospital visits, and the occasional grocery trip. The thought of an evening surrounded by music, light, and conversation was tempting. "I don't know." "You're going," Mrs. Green declared, in the same tone she used when telling Clara to restock the napkins. "And you're going to tell me every detail when you get back." That evening, Clara sat at her mother's bedside in their small apartment, the invitation on the nightstand between them. "You should go," her mother said, her voice thin but determined. "You spend too much time taking care of me and working. You need some joy in your life." Clara adjusted her mother's blanket. "You're my joy, Mom, and I'd feel out of place there." Her mother took her hand, the skin paper thin over blue veins. "Remember what Dad used to say? The only place you don't belong is where you convince yourself you don't." Clara smiled at the memory of her father, gone now for 5 years. He had been a janitor at the city's concert hall, and sometimes he would sneak Clara in to watch the musicians rehearse. That was where she first fell in love with the piano, watching the performers' hands dance across the keys, creating magic from wood and wire. "Besides," her mother continued, "maybe you'll meet a handsome prince who'll sweep you off your feet." Clara laughed. "This isn't a fairy tale, Mom. Every good story has to start somewhere." The next day at work, Clara found herself watching the door, half expecting Harrison Montgomery to appear with an explanation. But he didn't come in, not even for his usual morning espresso. Instead, as Clara was leaving work that evening, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out, a middle-aged man in a uniform, and approached her. "Ms. Wilson, I have a package for you." He handed her a large white box tied with a silver ribbon. "From Mr. Montgomery," he added, seeing her confusion. "He also asked me to confirm if you'll be attending the gala on Saturday." Clara clutched the box, suddenly aware of passers-by watching the exchange. I haven't decided," the driver nodded politely. "The car will be here at 7:30 on Saturday evening should you choose to attend." He handed her a business card. "Please call this number if you need anything else." After he drove away, Clara hurried home, curious about the box but not wanting to open it on the street. Her mother was asleep when she arrived, so Clara quietly took the box to her small bedroom. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a dress, deep blue like the night sky, simple but elegant, with a note. "In case you need something to wear. No obligation. H.M." Clara stared at the dress, emotions warring within her. Part of her was touched by the gesture, but another part felt uncomfortable. Why would a man like Harrison Montgomery go to such trouble for someone he barely acknowledged? What did he want from her? The question nagged at her as she carefully hung the dress in her closet. It continued to trouble her over the next few days as she went about her routine, serving coffee, checking on her mother, paying bills, and trying to stretch her meager salary to cover the mounting medical expenses. By Saturday morning, curiosity had won out over caution. Clara decided she would go to the gala, if only to find out why she had been invited. Mrs. Green arrived at her apartment that afternoon, armed with makeup, hair products, and enthusiasm. Lisa's old roommate was a beauty school student, she explained, directing Clara to sit by the window where the light was best. "She taught me a few tricks," as Mrs. Green worked, transforming Clara's simple ponytail into an elegant updo. Clara's mother watched from her bed, offering encouragement and the occasional suggestion. "You look like a princess," her mother said when Clara finally put on the blue dress. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Clara didn't feel like a princess. She felt like herself in a borrowed skin. But seeing the joy on her mother's face made her stand a little straighter, smile a little more confidently. "Now remember," Mrs. Green said, handing Clara a small silver clutch bag she'd brought along. "If anyone asks about your family, just say they couldn't make it. No need to share your whole life story." At exactly 7:30, the black car pulled up outside. Clara kissed her mother goodbye, promised to be careful, and stepped out into the evening, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had no idea that across town in the grand Montgomery estate, Harrison was raising a glass with his friends, a smirk playing on his lips as he described the waitress he'd invited to their gathering. "Trust me," he was saying, "it'll be the highlight of the evening. I've set everything up perfectly." His friends laughed, already anticipating the entertainment to come. None of them could have imagined how the night would actually unfold, or how it would change Harrison's life forever. The car ride to the Montgomery estate felt like crossing into another world. Clara watched through the window as city streets gave way to tree-lined avenues, then to private roads with high gates and sprawling properties. Her stomach tightened with each passing minute. "First time at the estate, miss?" the driver asked, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. Clara nodded. "First time at any estate," he smiled kindly. "Don't worry. Just be yourself. Rich folks are just people with more money, that's all." Easy for him to say, Clara thought. At least he had a clear role here. What was hers? The car turned onto a long driveway lined with glowing lanterns. At the end stood the Montgomery Mansion, a grand stone building with countless windows blazing with light. Cars were already lined up in front, attended by valets in crisp uniforms. "Here we are," the driver said, pulling to a stop. "Enjoy your evening, miss." Clara stepped out, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. Around her, other guests were arriving. Women in designer gowns dripping with jewels, men in perfectly tailored suits. Clara took a deep breath and followed them up the wide steps to the entrance. Inside, the foyer opened into a grand ballroom filled with people. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over everything, and the murmur of conversation mixed with soft classical music, played by a small orchestra in the corner. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and tiny food that looked too pretty to eat. Clara stood frozen just inside the entrance, overwhelmed. She didn't see Harrison anywhere. "Would you like some champagne, miss?" A waiter appeared at her elbow offering a tray. "Oh, yes. Thank you." Clara took a glass, grateful for something to do with her hands. The champagne was crisp and light, nothing like the cheap wine she occasionally shared with friends on birthdays. She began to wander, admiring the artwork on the walls and the flower arrangements that probably cost more than her monthly rent. People glanced at her curiously, but no one approached. Clara was starting to wonder if she should just leave when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "You came." She turned to find Harrison Montgomery watching her, dressed in a perfectly fitted dark suit that made his usual office attire look casual by comparison. Up close, she noticed his eyes were an unusual shade of green. "I did," she said, "though I'm still not sure why I was invited." A smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Does there have to be a reason? Maybe I just wanted to liven things up a bit." Before Clara could respond, a group of people approached them. "Harrison, darling, who's your friend?" A woman with silver blonde hair and a tight smile looked Clara up and down. "Diane, everyone, this is Clara Wilson," Harrison said. "Clara, these are some of my oldest friends, Diane and Peter Blake, Thomas Winters, and Olivia Chen." Clara nodded politely, noting how they all seemed to be assessing her. "It's nice to meet you all. And how do you know Harrison?" Olivia asked, her voice sweet but her eyes sharp. Clara glanced at Harrison. Clara works at Sunny Corner Cafe," Harrison interrupted. "Makes the best coffee in the city. A barista. How charming," Diane said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "And what brought you to our little gathering tonight?" Clara felt her cheeks warm. "Harrison invited me. Did he now?" Thomas raised an eyebrow at Harrison. "How unusual." Harrison placed a hand lightly on Clara's back. "Clara's not just a barista. She has many hidden talents. Don't you, Clara?" There was something in his voice, a subtle challenge that made Clara uneasy. The others exchanged glances as if sharing a private joke. "I should get another drink," Clara said, desperate to escape the uncomfortable scrutiny. "No need," Harrison said, signaling to a passing waiter. "The night is young and there's someone I'd like you to meet." He guided her through the crowd, his hand remaining on her lower back. Clara was acutely aware of the eyes following them, the whispers behind raised hands. "They think I don't belong here," she said quietly. Harrison looked down at her. "And what do you think?" Clara considered this. "I think it doesn't matter where I come from. What matters is how I choose to act now that I'm here." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps. But it was quickly replaced by his usual confident expression. "Well said. Here we are." They had reached an older gentleman standing beside a magnificent grand piano in a corner of the ballroom. The piano was a beautiful instrument, its black surface gleaming under the chandeliers. "Clara, this is Mr. Reynolds. He's a longtime family friend and trustee of the Montgomery Foundation." Mr. Reynolds had kind eyes and a gentle handshake.
"Pleased to meet you, my dear. Mr. Reynolds is also a great appreciator of music," Harrison continued.
"He helped select this Steinway for our home." Clara's eyes were drawn to the piano. It had been so long since she'd played on a proper instrument, not the worn upright in her apartment building's common room where she sometimes practiced late at night when no one was around. "Do you play, Ms. Wilson?" Mr. Reynolds asked. Before she could answer, Harrison cut in. "Actually, Clara was just telling me earlier how much she loves the piano. Weren't you, Clara?" Clara frowned slightly. She hadn't mentioned anything about playing. "I bet she'd love to play something for us right now," Harrison said, his voice carrying enough that nearby conversations paused. People began to turn their attention toward them. Clara's heart raced. "I didn't say that." "Don't be modest," Harrison insisted, his smile fixed but his eyes challenging. "Everyone would love to hear you play. Wouldn't we?" Murmurs of agreement rose from the growing audience, though Clara noticed Diane and the others from earlier watching with barely disguised amusement. That's when Clara understood. This was why she'd been invited. Not as a guest, but as entertainment. The working-class girl who would embarrass herself attempting to play in front of the city's elite. She looked at Harrison, seeing clearly now the gleam of anticipation in his eyes. He expected her to refuse, to flee in humiliation, or worse, to attempt to play and fail miserably. Her first instinct was indeed to run, but then she thought of her father, who had taught her to hold her head high no matter the circumstance, of her mother, who had sacrificed so much to support Clara's passion for music before illness took its toll. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll play." A flash of surprise crossed Harrison's face, quickly masked by satisfaction. He gestured grandly toward the piano. "The stage is yours." The crowd parted as Clara walked to the piano, whispers following her like shadows. She heard Diane say to Olivia, "This should be good," with a stifled laugh. Mr. Reynolds pulled out the bench for her with a concerned look. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to, my dear." Clara sat down, adjusting her dress. "It's okay. I want to." The ballroom had grown quiet, all eyes on her. Clara saw Harrison standing with his friends, their expressions expectant, ready to witness her failure. She closed her eyes for a moment, blocking everything out. Then she placed her hands on the keys. The piano was perfectly tuned, its action responsive in a way her practice piano never was. Clara began with a few simple chords, reacquainting herself with the feel of a real instrument. Then, taking a deep breath, she launched into Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The first notes floated into the air, delicate and precise. Clara lost herself in the music, her fingers remembering what her mind had stored away years ago. The piece built gradually, flowing from gentle passages to more complex emotional sequences. She played with her whole body, swaying slightly as the music demanded, her face reflecting the changing moods of the piece. This wasn't just technical skill, it was storytelling through sound. The room had fallen completely silent except for the music. Clara didn't see the astonished faces around her, didn't notice how Harrison's smug smile had frozen, then faded, replaced by genuine shock. As she approached the final measures, Clara allowed herself to look up. The crowd was still entranced. In their eyes, she saw not the mockery she had expected, but wonder. She finished with a gentle cascade of notes that seemed to linger in the air even after her hands lifted from the keys. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Then the room erupted in applause. People surged forward, surrounding the piano. "Magnificent. Where did you study? Are you a professional?" The questions came from all directions. Mr. Reynolds was beaming, clapping enthusiastically. "Extraordinary, my dear." "Absolutely extraordinary." Clara stood, slightly dazed by the response. Her eyes found Harrison, still standing where she'd left him. His friends were applauding along with everyone else, their earlier disdain replaced by genuine admiration. But Harrison just stared at her, his composed facade cracked open to reveal something Clara couldn't quite identify. Surprise, certainly, but also confusion, embarrassment, and perhaps a hint of regret. As the crowd continued to praise her, Clara realized something had shifted. She had come here as an object of ridicule, a pawn in some cruel game. But now, in this moment, she was exactly where she belonged. And Harrison Montgomery, who had thought himself so clever, was the one left speechless. Clara stood by the piano, surrounded by admirers. The faces that had looked down on her minutes ago now gazed at her with respect and curiosity. An older woman in a deep purple dress touched her arm. "My dear, that was remarkable. Where did you study?" Clara smiled politely. "I had a scholarship at the National Conservatory for a while." "Only for a while?" a man with silver-rimmed glasses asked. "With talent like yours, you should be performing professionally." Clara felt a pang in her chest, the familiar ache of what might have been. "Life had other plans," she said simply. More questions followed, and Clara answered as best she could without revealing too much. She didn't mention the tiny apartment she shared with her ailing mother. She didn't explain how medical bills had drained their savings, how she'd had to leave school when the money ran out, how she played now only on the worn-out piano in her building's common room, usually late at night when everyone else was asleep. Mr. Reynolds stayed by her side, fielding some of the more intrusive questions and occasionally giving her a reassuring smile. He seemed genuinely impressed by her playing, not just surprised that a cafe worker could perform so well. "You must play something else," someone insisted. And murmurs of agreement swept through the crowd. Clara glanced around, suddenly aware that Harrison was nowhere to be seen. His friends remained, watching her with newfound interest, but he had vanished. "Perhaps later," Mr. Reynolds said, noticing her searching gaze. "I think Ms. Wilson could use some refreshment after such a performance." He guided her gently away from the piano, through the crowd of admirers, and toward a quieter corner where waiters were serving food. Clara accepted a small plate and a fresh glass of champagne, grateful for the moment to breathe. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not at all," Mr. Reynolds replied. "Though I must say I'm rather curious myself." That was no amateur performance. Clara took a sip of champagne. "I started playing when I was 6. My father worked as a janitor at the concert hall downtown. Sometimes he'd sneak me in to watch the musicians rehearse." Mr. Reynolds nodded encouragingly. "There was an old practice piano in the back room," Clara continued. "Nobody used it much. The hall manager noticed I was always hanging around and offered to let me play it while my father finished his shifts." "Self-taught then?" "At first. But one of the pianists who performed regularly at the hall, Miss Abramova, she started giving me lessons for free. Said it would be a crime to let my natural ear go to waste." Clara smiled at the memory of the stern Russian woman who had become her first real teacher. Ms. Abramova had eventually helped Clara apply for the scholarship that changed her life. For a while, at least, in the conservatory? Mr. Reynolds prompted gently. Clara's smile faded. "I was there for almost 2 years. Then my mother got sick, cancer. The treatments weren't covered by insurance and we had no savings. I had to leave school and find work." Mr. Reynolds's face softened with understanding. "I'm sorry to hear that. How is your mother now?" "The doctors say she's stable. Not getting worse, but not really getting better either." Clara set down her barely touched plate. "I should probably be getting home to her soon." "Of course." Mr. Reynolds glanced across the room. "Though there's someone who might like to speak with you first." Clara followed his gaze and saw Harrison standing alone near a tall window, watching them. His expression was unreadable. "I'm not sure I have anything to say to him," Clara said, her earlier confusion turning to anger as she remembered why she'd been invited. "Perhaps," Mr. Reynolds said mildly, "but I think he may have something to say to you." Before Clara could respond, Diane Blake appeared at her side, her earlier disdain replaced by an overly friendly smile. "There you are. Everyone's talking about your performance. Simply divine." She linked her arm through Clara's as if they were old friends. "You must tell us more about yourself. Where have you been hiding all this talent?" Clara gently extracted her arm. "Behind a coffee counter, apparently." Thomas and Olivia joined them, both now eager to be seen with the woman they'd dismissed minutes earlier. Clara noticed how quickly their attitudes had changed now that she'd proven herself to be more than just a waitress. "Harrison never mentioned you were a pianist," Olivia said, her voice honey-sweet. "What a delightful surprise." "I don't think Harrison knew," Clara said. She looked again toward the window, but Harrison had disappeared once more. "Well, he certainly knows how to find interesting people." Thomas said. First that brilliant violinist he discovered busking in the park last year, and now you. Clara frowned slightly. He discovered someone else? Thomas waved his hand dismissively. Some street musician. Harrison got him an audition with the symphony. The boy's quite famous now, though not nearly as talented as you, Diane added quickly. Clara felt a prickle of unease. Was this a pattern for Harrison? Finding talented people in humble circumstances and, helping them? Showing them off to his friends? The violinist's story didn't fit with what had happened tonight. She excused herself from the group and made her way through the crowd, nodding politely at compliments, but continuing to move. She needed air, needed space to think. A set of glass doors led to a terrace overlooking gardens illuminated by tasteful landscape lighting. Clara stepped outside, the cool night air a relief after the warmth of the ballroom. She wasn't alone. Harrison stood at the stone balustrade, looking out at the carefully manicured grounds. He turned when he heard the doors open. For a moment, neither spoke. The sounds of the party were muffled out here, replaced by the gentle splashing of a fountain somewhere in the darkness. You never mentioned you could play, Harrison finally said. You never asked, Clara replied. In fact, before tonight you barely even looked at me when I served your coffee. Harrison had the grace to look embarrassed. I deserved that. Why did you invite me here? Clara asked directly. Was it just to humiliate me? Harrison ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture from someone who always seemed so perfectly composed. Yes, he admitted. My friends and I, we made a bet. The confirmation hurt more than Clara expected. A bet. It was stupid and cruel, Harrison said quickly. I'm not proud of it, but you did it anyway. I did. He turned to face her fully. And then you sat down at that piano and proved just how wrong I was. Clara crossed her arms. So now what? You've had your fun. Your friends got a surprise. What happens next? Harrison seemed genuinely at a loss. I don't know. This isn't how I expected the evening to go. That makes two of us. Clara looked back toward the ballroom where people were still enjoying themselves, unaware of the conversation happening on the terrace. I should go. My mother will be waiting up. Let me drive you, Harrison offered. Clara shook her head. The car that brought me can take me home. Clara. Harrison stepped toward her, then stopped. I'm sorry. Truly. She studied his face, trying to gauge his sincerity. His green eyes seemed honest enough, but Clara had learned long ago not to trust appearances, especially from people who viewed her world as entertainment. Good night, Mr. Montgomery, she said formally, and turned to leave. Will you come back? The question surprised them both. Harrison looked as if he hadn't meant to ask it. Clara paused. Why would I? The foundation is hosting a benefit concert next month, he said quickly. Local musicians raising money for arts education in public schools. We could use someone with your talent, Clara almost laughed. You want me to perform? After tonight? I want to make things right, Harrison said. What I did was inexcusable, but you're playing. It shouldn't be wasted on an empty room at night. Clara stared at him. How did you know I play at night? Harrison looked away. Thomas wasn't entirely accurate earlier. The violinist wasn't busking in a park. He was playing in an apartment building's common room after his late shift. The building superintendent mentioned there was a pianist who practiced there too, usually after midnight. You knew, Clara said slowly. You knew I played before you invited me here. I suspected, Harrison corrected. The superintendent didn't know your name, just that you worked at a cafe. When I saw you there, I thought it might be you, but I didn't know if you were any good. So you set up this whole thing to, what, test me? I told you it was a bet. A stupid, thoughtless bet. Harrison's composure was cracking. I was wrong. About everything. Clara wasn't sure what to believe. The evening had taken so many unexpected turns, leaving her feeling off balance. I need to go, she said again, more firmly this time. Harrison nodded, accepting her decision. The car will be out front whenever you're ready. Clara returned to the ballroom, said her goodbyes to Mr. Reynolds and a few others who had been kind to her, and made her way to the entrance. As promised, the same car that had brought her was waiting. The driver smiled when he saw her. Home already, miss? The night's still young. It's been eventful enough, Clara replied, settling into the back seat. As the car pulled away, She looked back at the grand house with its blazing lights and thought about Harrison's revelation. He had suspected she played before inviting her.
Had set her up for humiliation.
Yet when she'd proven her talent, something had changed in him. Clara wasn't sure if she would accept his invitation to perform at the benefit concert. She wasn't sure she would ever see Harrison Montgomery again. But as the car carried her back to her small apartment and her waiting mother, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. A week passed. Clara returned to her routine, serving coffee, caring for her mother, and trying not to think about the night at the Montgomery estate. But memories of the grand piano and the feeling of music flowing through her fingers kept surfacing at unexpected moments. "You've been quiet lately," Mrs. Green commented as they prepared the cafe for opening. "Still thinking about that fancy party?" Clara arranged pastries in the display case. "Sometimes. And the man who invited you? What was his name again?" "Harrison Montgomery," Clara said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. "And it wasn't exactly a friendly invitation." Mrs. Green paused, dish towel in hand. "What do you mean?" Clara hadn't told anyone the full story of that night. Not Mrs. Green, not even her mother. Something about the humiliation, followed by triumph, followed by confusion, felt too personal to share. But now the weight of keeping it inside pressed on her, so she told Mrs. Green everything. The bet, the setup at the piano, the unexpected reaction to her playing, and Harrison's strange confession on the terrace. Mrs. Green's expression darkened as Clara spoke. "The nerve of that man, using you as entertainment for his rich friends." "That's what I thought at first," Clara said. "But then why would he mention the other musician? The violinist he helped? Men like that always have angles," Mrs. Green said firmly. "Don't be fooled by a handsome face and an apology." Clara nodded, but part of her wondered. There had been something in Harrison's eyes during their conversation on the terrace, a vulnerability that didn't fit with the calculating person Mrs. Green described. The morning rush began, and Clara pushed thoughts of Harrison aside, focusing on orders and customers. Around 10, the door chimed, and Clara looked up automatically. Harrison Montgomery walked in, dressed in his usual business attire, but looking somehow less composed than she remembered. Their eyes met across the counter and he hesitated before approaching. "Good morning," he said, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "Good morning," Clara replied, aware of Mrs. Green watching closely from the kitchen doorway. "Just a double espresso today?" "Yes, please." He glanced around the half-full cafe. "And maybe a minute of your time, if that's possible." Clara busied herself with making his espresso. "I'm working, I know. He lowered his voice. "I wanted to apologize again, and to give you this." He placed an envelope on the counter. It wasn't like the fancy invitation from before. Just a plain white business envelope with her name written on it. "What is it?" Clara asked, sliding his espresso across the counter. "Information about the benefit concert I mentioned. No pressure, just an opportunity if you want it." Their fingers brushed as he paid, and Clara felt an unexpected jolt. She pulled her hand back quickly. "Thank you for the coffee," Harrison said, picking up his espresso. Instead of immediately turning to his phone as he usually did, he added, "You make the best coffee in the city." "I meant that part." He left without waiting for a response, leaving Clara staring at the envelope on the counter. Mrs. Green emerged from the kitchen. "So that's him." "That's him," Clara confirmed. "Handsome," Mrs. Green admitted grudgingly. "But still trouble. What's in the envelope?" Clara opened it and found a formal letter about the Montgomery Foundation's annual benefit concert for arts education. It outlined the program, the other performers, several of whom Clara recognized as respected local musicians, and a personal note from Harrison. "No strings attached. Just music." "He wants me to perform," Clara said, showing Mrs. Green the letter. "Are you going to?" Clara folded the letter carefully. "I don't know." That evening, Clara sat beside her mother's bed reading aloud from a novel they'd been working through together. Her mother listened with eyes closed, a small smile on her thin face. When Clara finished the chapter, her mother opened her eyes. "Something's on your mind, sweetheart." You stumbled over 3 different paragraphs. Clara set the book aside. "Is it that obvious?" "To me it is." Her mother reached for her hand. "Tell me." So Clara told the story again. this time including details she'd left out with Mrs. Green, the way her heart had raced when Harrison approached her on the terrace, the conflicted feelings she'd experienced when he'd asked her to return. "And now he wants you to play at this concert," her mother said when she finished. "Yes." "Do you want to?" Clara leaned back in her chair. "Part of me does. It's been so long since I played for an audience, a real one, I mean. Not just you or the empty common room, but I don't trust him. Or his motives." Clara squeezed her mother's hand gently. "And even if I did, what's the point? One concert won't change anything. I'll still be a waitress with bills to pay and dreams I had to give up." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember what your father used to say about music?" Clara smiled. "He said a lot of things about music. He said music isn't just something you do, it's something you are. Even when you're not playing, it's still inside you, waiting." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I remember." "Maybe this concert isn't about changing your circumstances," her mother said softly. "Maybe it's about honoring that part of yourself, the part that's still waiting." Later that night, after her mother had fallen asleep, Clara slipped out of the apartment and down to the common room. The old upright piano stood in the corner, its finish dulled by years of use. Some of its keys yellowed and chipped. Clara sat on the bench and began to play softly, testing out pieces she might perform at the concert if she decided to go. The piano was terribly out of tune, nothing like the magnificent Steinway at the Montgomery estate. But it was familiar, comfortable. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't notice the building superintendent watching from the doorway until she finished a piece. "That was beautiful," he said, startling her. "You don't usually play this early." Clara checked her watch, just past 10 p.m. "I didn't think anyone would mind." "Not at all." He stepped into the room. "In fact, I've been meaning to tell you. There was a man here asking about you a few weeks ago." Clara's hand stilled on the keys. "What kind of man?" "Wealthy type. Expensive suit. Said he'd heard there was a pianist who played here late at night." The superintendent scratched his beard. "I didn't give him your name or anything. Just told him you worked at a cafe." "When was this?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. 3, maybe 4 weeks ago." He shrugged. "Didn't think much of it until I saw your picture in the society pages." "My picture?" The superintendent nodded. "My wife reads those things. You were at some fancy charity event at the Montgomery place. She recognized you right away." Clara thanked him, finished playing, and returned to her apartment, her mind racing. So Harrison had been looking for her specifically before he ever approached her at the cafe. But why? What game was he playing? The next morning, Clara made a decision. She would perform at the concert, but on her terms. She would find out what Harrison Montgomery really wanted. She called the number on the letter and left a message accepting the invitation. 2 hours later, while she was on her break, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Clara, it's Harrison Montgomery." He sounded surprised, as if he hadn't expected her to answer. "I got your message." "About the concert?" "Yes," Clara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'll do it. That's wonderful." His relief was audible. "The foundation will handle everything. Transportation, any clothes you might need, rehearsal time with the piano." "I don't need clothes," Clara said firmly. "And I only have one condition." "What's that?" "You tell me the truth, all of it. Why you were asking about me before you invited me to the gala, why you set up that humiliating scenario with the piano, what you really want from me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Clara waited, prepared to hang up if he tried to dodge her questions. "All right," Harrison finally said, but not over the phone. "Can you meet me somewhere?" "Neutral ground. Not my house, not your workplace," Clara considered. "There's a park near my apartment. Corner of Elm and 7th. They have chess tables near the fountain. Tomorrow, noon. I'll be there." After they hung up, Clara stood in the small break room wondering if she'd made the right choice. Mrs. Green would tell her she was being foolish. Maybe she was, but something about this situation didn't add up. The cruel bet at the gala didn't match with a man who would seek out talented musicians and help them. The dismissive customer who barely acknowledged her existence didn't align with someone who would apologize so earnestly, or look at her the way Harrison had on the terrace. Clara wanted answers. And tomorrow she would get them, even if they weren't what she hoped to hear. The park was busy with lunchtime visitors when Clara arrived the next day. Children played near the fountain while office workers sat on benches enjoying the sunshine. Clara spotted Harrison immediately. He looked out of place in his business suit among the casual park-goers. He stood when he saw her approaching, his expression a mixture of relief and nervousness. Not the confident businessman she was used to seeing. "You came," he said as she sat across from him at the chess table. "I said I would." Clara folded her hands on the table. "Now tell me the truth." Harrison looked down at the weathered chess pieces, then back at Clara. "It's not a simple story. I have time." He took a deep breath. "My mother was a pianist. Not professionally, her family wouldn't allow it. But she was talented. She taught me to play when I was young." Clara hadn't expected this beginning. "You play?" A sad smile crossed his face. "Badly, I never had her gift. But I loved watching her play. The way she transformed when she sat at the piano, like she became her true self." He shifted in his seat, glancing around the park. "She died when I was 16, cancer. My father, he wasn't a kind man. He saw her music as a distraction, a waste of time. After she was gone, he got rid of her piano. Said it was time I focused on real work instead of useless hobbies." Clara felt a stab of sympathy despite herself. "I'm sorry about your mother." Harrison nodded his thanks. "My father built the family business through sheer force of will. He expected me to follow in his footsteps exactly. When I took over after his death 5 years ago, I made some changes, started the foundation for arts education. It was my way of honoring my mother." "That still doesn't explain why you were looking for me before the gala," Clara pointed out, "or why you set me up to be humiliated." Harrison winced. "The second part was a mistake, a terrible one. My friends and I, we've known each other since prep school. We're not always the best influences on each other. That's not an excuse." "No, it's not," he agreed. "The truth is, I'd been looking for you for months. Ever since the building superintendent mentioned a young woman who played late at night with extraordinary skill." "But why?" Clara pressed. "What did you want from me?" Harrison hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Clara. It was a flyer, worn at the edges as if it had been handled many times. "Young Artists Competition," the headline read. "Grand prize, full scholarship to the National Conservatory." Clara stared at it. "This is from 5 years ago." "Yes." Harrison watched her carefully. "Did you enter?" Yes, I was a finalist." Clara remembered it clearly. The nerve-wracking preliminaries, the elation of making it to the finals, the heartbreak that followed. "I didn't win." "You should have," Harrison said quietly. Clara looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "The competition was sponsored by Montgomery Industries, one of my father's pet projects. He liked the publicity, the tax write-off. He didn't care about the music." Harrison's voice hardened. "That year, one of his business partner's daughters was a finalist. My father made sure she won, regardless of talent." Clara felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. "How do you know I should have won?" "You weren't even there." "No, but the judge's original score sheets were in my father's files. I found them after he died, along with notes about his arrangement with the head judge." Harrison's eyes held genuine regret. "You had the highest scores, Clara, by a significant margin." Clara sat back, stunned. All these years she'd believed she simply hadn't been good enough, that the other girl had deserved the scholarship more. "So what is this?" she asked finally. "Guilt? Are you trying to make up for your father's actions?" "Partly," Harrison admitted. "But it's more than that. When I heard about a talented pianist working at a cafe, playing only in empty rooms late at night, I was curious. When I realized who you were, that you were the same Clara Wilson from the competition, I wanted to hear you play. To know if you were as good as those score sheets suggested. So you invited me to your house under false pretenses and tricked me into playing," Clara said flatly. Harrison had the grace to look ashamed. "The bet with my friends was real and inexcusable. But yes, I engineered the situation to hear you play. I never expected—" He trailed off. "Never expected what?" "How it would make me feel," he said softly. "When you played, it was like seeing my mother again. That same transformation. That same authenticity." Clara didn't know what to say. Part of her was still angry at the manipulation, the lies, but another part understood the complicated tangle of grief, guilt, and genuine appreciation that had driven Harrison's actions. "What do you want from me now?" she asked. "Nothing you don't want to give," Harrison said. "The concert invitation is genuine. No strings attached. But there's something else. He reached into his jacket again and withdrew an envelope. This one was thick, official-looking. The Montgomery Foundation has established a new program, he explained as Clara opened the envelope. Full scholarships for musicians who had to abandon their education due to financial hardship, plus living stipends and medical coverage for dependents. Clara skimmed the documents inside. Details of the program, application forms, letters of recommendation. And you want me to help select the recipients? I want you to be the first recipient, Harrison said. If you're interested. Clara looked up from the papers, searching his face for any sign of deception. Why would you do this for me? Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted, he said simply. Because my father's actions robbed you of an opportunity you earned. Because he stopped collecting himself. Because I'd like to make things right. Clara closed the envelope slowly. I need time to think about this. Of course. Harrison stood, signaling the end of their meeting. The concert is in 3 weeks. You have until then to decide about the scholarship. Clara rose as well. Thank you for telling me the truth. Thank you for listening. He hesitated, then added, And Clara, whatever you decide about the scholarship, I hope you'll keep playing. The world is better with your music in it. The weeks leading up to the concert passed in a blur. Clara practiced during every spare moment, using her lunch breaks to visit a music store where the owner kindly let her use one of the display pianos. She selected Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, challenging, emotional, and deeply personal. She told her mother everything Harrison had revealed, including the scholarship offer. What do you think I should do? Clara asked as they sat together one evening. Her mother smiled. I think you already know the answer. I've seen the light in your eyes these past weeks. It's been gone for too long. The night of the concert arrived. The venue was smaller than the Montgomery estate, but no less elegant. A historic theater downtown with perfect acoustics. Clara waited backstage, wearing a simple but beautiful dark blue dress she had chosen herself. Harrison found her just before the program began. Nervous? He asked. A little, Clara admitted. It's been a long time since I performed for a real audience. You'll be magnificent, he said with quiet confidence. Oh, I almost forgot. There's someone here to see you. He stepped aside to reveal a woman in a wheelchair, Ms. Abramova. Clara's first piano teacher, now in her 80s, but still regal. My star pupil, the old woman said, her Russian accent as thick as Clara remembered, finally back where she belongs. Clara knelt beside the wheelchair, tears threatening. How did you— Your young man found me, Ms. Abramova said, nodding toward Harrison. Said you needed your teacher on your big night. Clara looked up at Harrison, who shrugged modestly. I made some calls. Later, as Clara took her place at the grand piano on stage, she saw her mother in the front row, looking tired but proud. Ms. Abramova sat beside her, and in the seat next to them was Mrs. Green, dressed in her Sunday best. And in the second row, just behind them, sat Harrison Montgomery, watching her not with the expectation of entertainment or the calculation of a bet, but with genuine appreciation. Clara began to play, losing herself in the music as she always did. The piece told a story, her story of struggle and hope, of dreams deferred but not abandoned. When she finished, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Backstage, after accepting countless compliments and congratulations, Clara found Harrison waiting. Have you decided? He asked. About the scholarship? Clara smiled. I have. I'll accept on one condition. Name it. I want to help select the other recipients. And I want to teach piano to kids who can't afford lessons. Through the foundation. Harrison's face lit up. Done. Clara held out her hand to seal the agreement, but Harrison hesitated. There's one more thing, he said. I need to be honest with you, completely honest. What is it? These past weeks, getting to know you, it's been about more than making amends or even about the music. He took a deep breath. I care about you, Clara, as a person, and I'd like the chance to see where that might lead. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility. Clara looked at the man before her, so different from the arrogant customer who had once ignored her, or the calculating host who had tried to humiliate her. People could change, she realized. Sometimes they just needed the right music to transform them. Possibility, she repeated and took his outstretched hand. I think I'd like that.